Is there anything more that can be done congressionally, legislatively to help these folks?
In a moment like this, we feel just as helpless as everyone else does. It touches so many families, and all we know to do at this moment is pray.
There was very early warning. They warned a day before. They warned even 2 days before. They warned 4 hours before. Maybe they should have had bells or something go off.
There you have it, MAGA working at maximum brain capacity to come up with these brilliant talking points in the wake of the tragic flash floods that devastated Texas just weeks ago. It's important to sometimes revisit these stories and make sure that we are holding people to account once the news cycle moves on. So take a look also here at this clip of Kristi Noem just straight up denying. Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, just straight up denying the facts on the ground.
The New York Times is reporting that thousands of calls from flood victims to FEMA call centers went unanswered in the middle of this ongoing disaster because you didn't renew contracts to keep call center staff in place until nearly 1 week after the floods. Why did it take so long to extend those contracts?
It's just false. Those contracts were in place. Nobody,
it didn't take 5 days?
No employees were off of work. Every one of them was answering calls. So false reporting, fake news, and it's discouraging. It's discouraging that during this time when we have such a loss of life and so many people's lives have turned upside down, that people are playing politics with this.
Well, that is very insulting and ridiculous. Kristi Noem, somebody who, side note, you should keep as far away from your dog as possible. While communities and families continue to feel the weight of the tragedy and continue to get slapped in the face by this Trump administration, some Democrats at least are trying to demand answers and accountability from Donald Trump's lackeys, many of whom are woefully underqualified for their positions, like current acting administrator of FEMA, David Richardson.
So many grieving neighbors and families on the ground who have been working around the clock in response to this disaster. To those brave women and men, we see you, we thank you, and we will not forget your heroism. Meanwhile, the acting FEMA administrator, David Richardson, before us today, was missing in action. For the first 48 hours, the most critical window for search and rescue, he never visited the National Response Coordination Center. For more than a week, he stayed away from Texas, and for 10 days, he made no statement about this tragedy. Not a word of sympathy or reassurance to the public. When he appeared finally in Texas on July 12th, it felt like a box-checking exercise to quiet his critics. He stayed only a few hours. But in his rush, Mr. Richardson failed to check the most important box, basic human decency. This tragedy forces some incredibly hard questions. Did the FEMA administrator fulfill his legal duty? Did he fulfill his moral duty? Did the administrator sitting before us do everything that he could to save lives?
Look, it's very tough in the wake of tragedies like this, but at least it's good to see somebody here, a Democrat, fighting for a cause like improving FEMA's responses, especially given how Trump and Republicans have not only been attacking FEMA in an attempt to discredit its very important, crucial life or death work and shove those responsibilities off to the state, but straight up trying to dismantle FEMA. Kristi Noem promising that let me make sure I'm not misquoting it here. Kristi Noem explicitly stating in March plans to eliminate FEMA. In June, Trump himself saying FEMA would be phased out after this year's hurricane season. FEMA lost about 20 to 33% of its workforce, including forced layoffs and voluntary buyouts, which have gutted their staff. A lot of hazard mitigation and grant programs were halted or defunded, weakening states' abilities to prepare for disasters. And many say that because Secretary Noem put in a policy that anything above $100,000 of an expense needed to be directly signed by her, it caused a 72-hour delay in deploying search and rescue teams during these floods. And of course, critical calls going unanswered. Only a certain number of calls could be answered, but of course, more of them can be answered when you don't gut your staff.
Secretary Noem required her personal sign-off on every contract above $100,000. That bottleneck delayed urban search and rescue teams for more than 72 hours. By the time many urban search and rescue teams reached Texas, no one had been found alive for days. Days. On July 5th, less than 24 hours after the tragedy, FEMA's call center contract expired because of this $100,000 sign-off policy. The result, the vast majority of calls from survivors went unanswered. Families desperate for shelter and aid were met with silence. Can you imagine losing a family member, losing your home, and having your call go unanswered when you're looking for a lifeline. Yet on July 11th, with over 100 people still missing and search teams still working to find people, President Trump and Secretary Noem called it, quote, the best FEMA response ever, unquote. All while this administration was working to dismantle FEMA, the very agency whose workers were still risking their lives to save others.
This is exactly the kind of situation we've been trying to alert people to about ever since Republicans went full throttle on gutting and dismantling the administrative state from the inside, just haphazardly with a chainsaw as they proudly wielded on stage. Far too many of our elected officials, for them, budget proposals are just numbers on paper. You can just move it around and cut it and joke about it on stage with a chainsaw and joke about how you're just going to cut everything and then save a bunch of money. But in the real world, human beings' lives are on the line, and then an extra slap on the face when you do that, and then you just propose a new budget to give such tax cuts to people that it actually increases the government's budget by so much. You undo far, far, far more than any of the cuts you did, any of the cuts you made, and let lives fall wherever they may.
Mr. Richardson, I'm sure, knows under federal law, under the National Response Framework, FEMA does not wait for a request from the local government. Under the National Response Framework, federal law requires FEMA to anticipate the needs of states in disasters, to coordinate proactively, and not to wait on the state's request for positioning resources. Mr. Richardson, were you aware that this is federal law for you to act proactively and not to wait for a request from Governor Abbott to pre-position resources?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Stanton. The capability indeed was pre-positioned, and that's why I mentioned Texas Task Force 1. It was pre-positioned in Texas and ready to go. Once again, that's a federally trained, federally equipped, and they were.
Mr. Richardson, I got to cut you off because I have a short time. You need to talk to your staff because your staff was pointing the finger at Governor Abbott and say the lack of urban search and rescue proactivity was based upon a late request from the governor's office. My belief, and it sounds like your belief, is that the requirement for you as the FEMA administrator is to anticipate, in light of the weather reports and how bad it was going to be, was to pre-position those urban search and rescue folks in advance. And I believe that FEMA has failed in that mission because there could have been a lot more urban search and rescue there later. They weren't there until 72 hours after the tragic incident. Where were you on July 4th and July 5th of this year?
On July 4th, I was on vacation.
When did you return from your vacation?
I returned the next day.
So on July 5th, you returned to Washington, D.C.?
I spent the entire vacation in my vehicle speaking on my phone to either the state of Texas or DHS, coordinating for the events in Texas.
Were you on the first plane back to Washington then from your vacation?
I was in my truck with my two boys and myself. I was in my truck. I remained in my truck the whole time.
When did you first learn of Secretary Noem's $100,000 sign-off policy, and did you warn her or anyone at DHS about the potential for delays in FEMA's ability to respond as a result of that policy?
The Secretary signs anything that comes across her desk nearly immediately without undue delay. And I never had a concern about the $100,000 memo, never concerned me. I've never seen it cause any undue delay.
The $100,000 sign-off policy did not delay your ability to proactively put forward resources, urban search and rescue resources in place as soon as you knew about how bad the flood was.
Under President Trump's leadership and Secretary Noem's leadership, their exceptional leadership, the support that was so critical to the people and the state of Texas on their worst day was on target, on time, and that is what they told me. Yeah. That's what the president said. That's what the secretary said. Texas got what they needed when they needed it.
So your lack of visibility in the hours and days and even week after this horrific flood that cost so many lives is shocking. Secretary Noem was very present. You were not. Did President Trump, Secretary Noem, or any official at the White House direct you to stand down during this crisis?
I was in constant communication with the state of Texas, DHS, and the White House handling the disaster immediately when I found out. And I remained so for the entire time. Constant communication with the emergency manager in the state of Texas, NIMKID, as well as Region 6, as well as communication with the White House and Secretary Noem. I was on full duty, full time.
Mr. Richardson, you were nowhere near Texas at the critical moments in the search and rescue, and you did not even show your face for more than a week after the flood. You are the administrator of this critical agency. You're the leader, but you did not lead as you are required to by federal law. But worse, you seem uninterested to learn what went wrong and how to respond better. Do the victims and survivors in Texas deserve an apology?
What happened in Texas was an absolute tragedy. It's hard to fathom. I went to Texas. I flew over. It was an absolute tragedy. My heart goes out to the people in Texas.
Yeah,
I know that there was...
That was intended as a yes or no question, and I'll appropriately take that as a no. Mr. Chairman, this wasn't just incompetence. It wasn't just indifference. It was both. And that deadly combination likely cost lives. I yield back.
I mean, this man just looks unprepared. What's up with the hair? Side note, you didn't make your hair look super cool with like your hair falling down in front while you're talking about how you didn't cut your vacation short and didn't go to Texas for over a week when that's literally your job is the federal government's response to natural disasters, to be there on the ground and coordinate it and know what's going on. These disasters are only going to be getting worse and worse. We all know that. Climate change is getting worse and worse. So our government, you would think, would be beefing up organizations like FEMA, but instead they are trying to fully get rid of them. Of course, beefing them up, improving it, trying to fix our response, improve our response, take things to a better level, an improved place, will not happen under Republican leadership, regardless of how devastating these tragedies become over and over again. But that's what has been elected into office. That is the consequences we will have to deal with. And investigations, probably will not be going forward in any serious way now that the Republicans are in charge of all of it. Maybe after the midterms, we can have at least some accountability, if not some check on the unchecked power that does not seem to care about Americans' lives or even helping us with the resources necessary in the face of disaster, but instead it's just about bottom line and tax cuts and upgrades in life situation to just the very richest among us. Look, we all want to be rich, but not at the cost of our fellow citizens' lives, right? Maybe we can keep that in mind, possibly. I'm Ben Gleib for Rebel HQ. You can follow me at Ben Gleib on Instagram for lots more.